So welcome, Chelsea. It's great to have you on the show with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited too. And I love talking about money and finance. My background's more in communication and marketing, so we don't touch on finance so much, but I always find it so fascinating. And I know it's a point where a lot of women who are starting out in business or even growing their business, often it trips them up and it feels a bit overwhelming. So I'm really excited to hear your take on finance today. But first, how did you get started with your business? Because you went from Wall Street to starting helping families with their finance. What made that decision happen?
It's a pretty big change, right? To go from a hedge fund world working 80 hours a week to an online business and working from home. And so what happened was, I had planned to be in my career on Wall Street for a few more years. I never thought it was going to be a lifer thing. I thought I'd go do something entrepreneurial. But my first son was born, and that first year was really hard. I got postpartum depression. Going back to work was difficult, and I just knew it was time to do something else. And so about a week before his first birthday, I had this gift of being in this mom's Facebook group of 200 other women who had their first kid the same month I had my first kid, and we'd all been together since like early pregnancy from all over the world. And so I had kind of become the go-to person to answer their money questions. And so a week before my son's birthday, I was talking to my husband and I'm like, I feel like I'm answering the same questions over and over. I'm just going to start a blog. And so I started a blog. I put it up. It was completely a hobby. It legally had to be for the job that I was in. I wasn't allowed to have side businesses. And for 9 months, I ran this business just as a hobby. I didn't run it as a business. It was a hobby. I posted for the first 45 days. I posted every single day, answering questions directly from the moms in this group. I posted and asked them what their money questions were. And it really grew from there. And I loved the interaction. I loved seeing the confidence that came from these women as they got more involved in their finances, the things they were able to do. And so at this point, 9 months has passed, and I am 8 months pregnant with our second. And my water breaks early. And so we're in the hospital prepping for a preemie. My work is still sending me questions. And I looked at my husband. I said, like, I think this is it. I think I need to be done now. Like, the work is too stressful. I need to focus on family. And so I put in my resignation from my hospital bed and turned this hobby into a business. And so it was really trial by fire. I wouldn't recommend doing that to most people. We'd been preparing for financial independence for a long time. We had a good financial runway. We weren't putting ourselves in financial risk doing that. But it did mean that I had to learn how to pull this thing that wasn't set up to be properly monetized, wasn't set up to have systems in place. I had to do that all kind of by the seat of my pants. But
So,
now we're here, so we're good.
so often I go in and ask, like, what was the reality like versus what you thought it was going to be? But I guess you didn't think it was going to be anything.
Yeah, it was very different than what I thought in that we had a 2-year cash runway. So what we said is let's give it a year. We actually said we're going to give it a year, and if we're seeing positive signs that this is turning into a business, we'll stick it out the second year. If after the first year it's really still just struggling, then I'll think about going back to work, because my husband's a stay-at-home dad. So this was really a situation where I had to figure out how I was going to stay the breadwinner through this transition. He could have gone back to work, but that wasn't what we wanted our family structure to look like, right? And so for me, what I thought is that having this cash cushion would allow me to take a break. Like I mentioned, I had postpartum. I mentioned we were welcoming our second kid. So we are going to have two under two. And that really wasn't what happened. We talk about money mindset. Part of my biggest money mindset hangups are security and wanting to make sure that we feel very safe in overabundance of that. And so the reality of going from a very good paycheck to none while you build a business and the financial stress that can come in the early part of the building a business meant that I didn't really take a break. I had promised my husband I was going to take at least 3 months off, and I didn't. I got my first freelance client before my second was even born, and we started freelance writing right away. And so that transition of learning how to be patient with your business and not try to force like the fastest possible way to make money, but instead of finding the right possible way to make money, that was a big thing that I didn't expect to have to learn on the fly like that.
Yeah. And I think that idea of patience in the early days is a huge lesson. And I get it a lot with my clients as well. That, yeah, but can you just tell me this bit? It's like, no, but you have to do this bit first. Otherwise that next bit doesn't work.
Yes.
Yeah, I get that. I know that that's what you say, but no, trust me. And I love the phrase slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And when you
Mm-hmm.
get that foundation in place, then it really does help. But yeah, when you're just kind of thrust into it and you don't have that opportunity, then yeah, and when you start a business, I always point out to my clients that there's the creation phase, which is very exciting. It's very creative, obviously, and there's a bit of doubt and insecurity there, but the excitement and enthusiasm sees you through. And then on the other side, there's this control where everything is working and you know what you're doing and you can start to scale from there. But in between, there's this chaos phase that lots of
Yes.
people aren't prepared for, where you kind of have your structure, but now you have to test it and find your, like, do different things to find that right process and focus and see, well, where the money is, the money going to come from, because it's not always where you think. And sometimes your ideal client turns out to be not your ideal client at all, and you have to make all these little adjustments along the way, which is part of the journey. So
Yes.
and it kind of feels like you were building and doing the adjustments all at the same time.
Absolutely. We were in that place. And I think that there's so much money mindset stuff that here happens here too. That's not just about our business. It's actually about how we think about money personally and our ability to feel worthy of wealth personally, and whether we're open to actually having a profitable business. We see a lot of people, and I'm sure you see this too, where we talk about online business or even brick and mortar businesses, and all the headlines, all the focus is 7-figure business, 6-figure business. But what they mean is revenue. They don't mean profit. And there are plenty of 7, 8-figure businesses that have very minimal, if any, profit. And so we get caught up on these headline numbers and not actually focusing on, okay, how can I calm myself to actually interact with my P&L, actually pay attention to what is working, what's not working, and what allows me to kind of find the right work-life balance, the right profit balance for my business. That requires often a lot of unlearning, a lot of mindset work in there.
Mm. Yeah, exactly. And it's all about redefining what success is for yourself, because often we have this is first opportunity. We get to do what we want, how we want
Mm.
it, and create that lifestyle and security that means something to us. And I think that's something that's particularly important for women.
Yes.
I when I worked in banking and I set up a women's network there, I saw that their motivations were a little bit different to the men. The men wanted the status, the car, all of this kind of thing, whereas the women wanted to really contribute to something. They wanted to use their talents to mean something. And starting your own business is just the most incredible way to really fine tune those talents and make a difference. But you don't have a sustainable business if it's not profitable. It's, yeah, as you say, the revenue is great, but if it's not profitable, then it doesn't matter. And I have lots of people asking, "Oh, I need more clients." Like, no, you don't. You need the right clients. If you just have more clients, these could be just running you into the ground if you're not keeping an eye on those numbers. So
Absolutely.
where do people start with this? And you talked about a P&L and keeping an eye on the numbers, and but where do you start if you've never really done anything in finance? Um, well, obviously they can come to you.
No, what I think the first thing is to take a look, put the business aside for 1 second and look at your personal finances. I think if you're not involved in understanding what's happening at home, your business becomes much more stressful. And that's because we're focused on, we need money to live, we need the business to pay the bills. And so if we aren't clear on how much actually has to come out of the business for us to be safe and secure at home, we're going to cause a lot more strain in our business. And we're going to take clients on that we maybe didn't want to, or launch products that weren't quite ready because we're just trying to scramble. And so the first thing is to get in close with your family finances. What is our budget? How much does this business need to earn? How much of a runway do we have to make it earn that money, right? Because most of us aren't going to open a profitable business on day one. There's a learning process. That gap is, do we have the emergency fund? Do we have the money set aside to get me through to when we need to hit profitability? And so understanding how that is at home. And if you're married or you're in a relationship, having that conversation with your partner too. And so that they understand that you don't expect to be bringing money in for 6 months or for a year, whatever it is. And so that you're not constantly having this argument of them being like, well, you work on this 40 hours a week and we're not getting anything out of it yet. Sometimes that can really discourage women because they feel like their partner's not being supportive. But if you haven't talked about to your partner about what your financial goals and expectations are, it's hard for them to be supportive of it, right? Because they don't see the back end, they don't see what you're planning. And so that's the first thing. The second thing is figuring out, what do you personally want this business to do for you? What's your ideal end goal, right? Do you want a business where you work 50, 60 hours a week and make 7 figures and that's what you want? Or do you want a business where you work 25 hours a week and you make maybe a little bit less money, but you're okay with that? Focusing second on that and your mindset around that can help you make sure that you're building the right business, right? You're not going to necessarily want a big consulting business where you're going to have a lot of FaceTime with people if your goal is to work 25 hours a week and be with your kids, right? You want something that's going to be a little bit more flexible. And so we need to understand both of those sides, our personal goal and our home finance life, before we can get into our numbers, because we're not going to know what we're looking for.
Yeah.
After that, go ahead.
No, I was just saying that's really such a great place to start, because as you say, we often jump in and think about our business, but without knowing what we need. And I remember having that conversation with a mentor several years ago, and she's like, "Well, what do you want your income to be?" I said, "Well, this much," and she's like, "Well, what does that mean? Once you take away the tax and your expenses and these things, what do you want to be left with?" It's like, "Oh, I don't know. Well, what do you need to cover?" Like, I don't know. And then I felt so silly for not knowing this stuff. But so you're totally right. Know what you need first. A lot of doubt and insecurity just comes from like the ignorance as well. If you don't know what you need and know you can cover it, then of course you're going to have these doubts, but it makes perfect sense what you're saying. But I think it's certainly something I hadn't thought of when I started out. So thank you for sharing that.
And it also comes down to pricing, and women often undercharging for a lot of our services and our products, right? And so we run into this sometimes. I'll be working with someone who's making, their handcrafting business, right? They're making whatever it is, blankets, you name it. And you ask them how much they want to make. And they're like, I really want to make, take home, I want to make 6 figures. I want to make $100,000. And so we sit down, we say, okay, $100,000 minus the cost of a blanket, whatever. Okay, you need to make 700 quilts this year by yourself to like reach that number. And they're like, well, I can never do that. It takes me a week to make one. And I was like, okay, so then maybe we need to think about either your goal needs to be different or your pricing needs to be different. And maybe, or we need another stream of income. We need some kind of passive stream to make that work. And so that's the other thing, when your goal that's in your head that you haven't written down hasn't been matched with the business that you're building, you can create a ton of frustration because you're like, I'm working so hard and we're bringing on new clients and I still don't feel like I'm getting to this number. And that might just be because your pricing structure is wrong or your product is wrong and things like that. And so we want to make sure we're matching them up. But I do want to make sure you're looking at the numbers, right? So once you have your goals in place, or at least an idea of your goals in place, because we both know that as your business grows, you're going to figure things out. Things will shift and change. Your vision will shift and change. But once you have an idea of it, I want you to track some really basic numbers at first. I want you to track your revenue. I want you to track your total costs, which is how much money's going out the door every month, and your profit. Please do not forget to track your profit. This should be the most important number that you track. And I want you to build a habit, even from day one, of taking some profit out. I don't care if at the beginning it's 1% of the revenue that comes in the door, it's $5. I want you to build the habit of money coming out of the business, because once again, I think that we have some negative mindsets around issues, especially as women. And when our businesses are value driven, we feel weird about taking money for ourselves out of it, right? We're like, no, but this was created to help people do X, Y, Z. And so if I'm earning money from that, then I'm not helping as many people as I could be helping. We get kind of caught in this place. And so I want you to build the habit of feeding yourself, because if your business does not feed you and keep you happy and secure, you're not going to be able to help those people. It's not a business anymore. It's a hobby, and we can't run hobbies as our full-time jobs. It's not what we do. And so I want you to build the practice of pulling profit out and really just tracking that number on a regular basis. Depending on the type of business you run, that might mean once a week checking in. That might mean once a day you're checking in. So like we sell digital products, and that means every day we go in and we update those 3 numbers, and our whole team can see it, and we know how we're doing on a profit basis on a regular. But you don't need to necessarily get into all the details. You don't need to know how a balance sheet works at the beginning. I just want you to know what's coming in, what's going out, and how much do you need to keep.
Great. I think we can all do that.
I think so.
So you mentioned there a few times that women have this money mindset challenge, that we're not typically good necessarily at charging our worth, at saying, well, this is my value. Why do you think that is, that women find that so difficult?
Oh, it's so multifaceted, and it comes from many different angles. I think the first is that we're just told over and over again that we're not good managers of money, right? From a young age, that this is a man's responsibility to manage the money. And that comes in so many forms. And one I think that we overlook is that the ways women use money, whether that's clothing or shoes or things that they enjoy, makeup, we're told from age 2 that those things are quote unquote frivolous, and that a thing that man spends money on, buying a house, buying a fancy car, whatever, those are like important things, but we don't spend money on important things. And so we don't trust ourselves when it comes to what we want with our money. We don't trust ourselves with managing money. And so consciously or subconsciously, we undercut our ability to do so. So when it comes to business, one of the things that we do is we minimize profit. We continue to spend, we buy more tools, we hire more coaches, we buy a ton of classes for someone else to tell us what to do, instead of trusting ourselves, instead of trusting our ability to, hey, I earned this and I deserve this. Worthiness is another big thing. I'll tell you, last year was really just a little disheartening. We ran this survey of over 1,000 women in our community about what they think their biggest money mindset hangup was. And over 50% of the responses had some form of the phrase, I'm not worthy of the money. And so they think that there is somebody else out there who needs it more, who deserves it more. And just having that thought in your head repels money, right? It makes us push it away. We look for opportunities to make those mistakes, and we focus on the mistakes when we make them. And so those type of things really build into our ability to charge what we're worth. If we don't think we're worthy of wealth, if we don't think our skills are worthy of attention or praise, then we're not going to charge people for it. And the last one that comes up, I think, and this is not just women, this is in general, but we've built this whole culture globally around the idea that hard work equals money, right? And so that if we're not hustling, if we're not driving ourselves into the bone, down to the bone, we're going to not make money. And so anytime that money comes in easily, we build a good stream of passive income, we build a course that's doing really well, we think we've done something wrong. Like anytime it's easy, we need to, it's almost like we feel like we need to go break something because it's like we're waiting for the other shoe to drop. And so that's another thing that sabotages us a lot, is that we don't believe that we can set good boundaries, that we cannot work ourselves like crazy and be successful. We have a really hard time squaring those two.
Great insights there. And the more I do this, the longer I'm in business, the more people I help, the more I see that actually a lot of what it takes to succeed comes down to self-love and respect. And once you have that, then you do trust yourself. You do invest in yourself. You do allow yourself to charge those higher figures. But it's a whole process. It doesn't just happen overnight. But I think that's one of the wonderful things about a business, is it does push you to discover these things for yourself and start to grow into a CEO of not just your business, but your future, which I think is really exciting.
Absolutely.
So once people they've got their money mindset is in the right place, they're keeping an eye on the figures, they're drawing out some of this profit first, where should they be thinking next about their finances in their business?
So I want to touch real quick before we move on that the mindset work is never like done. We're never like, oh, I figured this out, I'm now great with it. Those negative stories are going to keep coming up. The goal is to build a habit of awareness. And so when it does crop up, when you have a client who sends you a bad review or something that comes in that really sends you back into that negative place, you have the ability to identify it and shift it, right? Say like, okay, I understand where that's coming from. I don't believe that about myself. I'm going to think something else and then move on. That's the goal, not to completely fix it. The
Yeah.
next step, though, once you're pulling profit out, is to look for opportunities to maximize that profit. So what is working? What's bringing the most dollars to the bottom line? And how can we pour more energy into those things? How can we make sure that we're maximizing profit and moving that percentage up? Because like I said at the beginning, maybe you're only taking $5 out at the start to just build the habit, but we want to build that up. So we want to figure out what's working. The second thing we want to make sure we're paying attention to is retirement. And so entrepreneurs on average are way behind their traditionally employed counterparts in saving for retirement, partially because we don't do a great job of optimizing for profit. And so we have less money to save for retirement, and because it's not as easy, right? When you're traditionally employed, usually your company offers some kind of retirement plan that you can automatically contribute into without you ever seeing the money. It just comes out of your paycheck. As entrepreneurs, we need to consciously make the decision to move that money into retirement. And so once you kind of get a consistent profit number going, I want you, just like we started with that basic habit forming small amount that goes into profit, we want to do the same with retirement. As soon as you have any kind of regular profit, set up a retirement account and start moving a little bit of money in every month. And as your profit grows, as you're pouring into the things that are working and your profit grows, up what you're putting into retirement. Because especially when we're self-employed, we want to make sure that if something happened, if we got sick, or if we needed to retire early or whatever it is, that money's going to be there for us to live on.
Yeah. And I love the idea that you came up with in the beginning, having that cash cushion is really a powerful concept. And I know a lot of people don't, and that does then drive your mindset in a very different way.
Yes.
I want to pick up on something that you mentioned before we went live, and you were a woman on Wall Street, which I'm assuming is like a woman in private banking here in Switzerland is quite rare.
Yes.
It's quite a unique environment that isn't necessarily yeah, it's challenging at times.
Mm-hmm.
But part of what got you there, you were saying, was how you had a mentor as a child that helped you understand money and finance and investing. So you kind of understood it and didn't have that fear in the first place. How important do you think that is to have like some kind of early exposure and mentorship?
I think it's hugely important. And so, yeah, so my dad's business partner was very savvy with money, saw that I had an interest with money from an early age. I was a natural saver. And so he kind of took me under his wing and taught me a lot of things. That's hugely beneficial. But what I think a lot of people don't notice is that studies show that the base values that we have about money, our base opinions about money, are set around age 7. And by age 3, most kids can understand the function of money, how, we earn money and we pay for things with it. They understand that. And then by 7, they're starting to set those core money beliefs. And the reason for that is because kids are always looking for stability in the world, right? And so when they see parents arguing about money, or they have some experience where their friend gets to get something or they don't, they're trying to create some rule that makes the world around them make sense. But kids have really limited perspective at age 7, as we all know, anyone who has kids. And so those assumptions don't necessarily make sense, but they run in the back of our brains for years often before we identify them. So if you're starting a business in your 30s or 40s and you've never really thought about your money mindset, you never really thought about the lessons you took away from childhood, they're really hard to unlearn. And so as an entrepreneur, if you have kids, I think the ability to talk to your kids about money is amazing, just because they're seeing you run your business. There's so much of similar lessons in personal finance that go into entrepreneurship. We can talk to them about profit. We can talk to them about how we budget for the business and about how we budget at home, how we're building wealth, things like that. We can have open conversations with our kids. And the sooner we can start those, the less unlearning has to happen in adulthood. And that's the hard part, is the unlearning.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I think we have a real opportunity being mums as entrepreneurs, and typically we're doing at least part of our business from home with the kids around, because that's just the way we we have to do. I would think it's not so much these days of a work-life balance, but more of just a life blend. Everything blends in. And I've always tried to include my children in my business, and helping me come up with new marketing plans and understanding, well, who are the clients and how they're going to feel through this, and what decisions are the right ones to make. But honestly, up until now, I hadn't really thought of included them in the finance part. So I think that would be quite an interesting thing to look into. And my daughter's now studying economics. She's 13, and she is starting to understand more about profit. And I have like, well, that's like what mummy's doing here, or like this client had that problem, and that was because this bit was missing, or that's how this worked in. So it was really nice to give them that kind of line of sight, if you like. But I'm sure there's much more I can do with that. So, and I think
kids are natural problem solvers, right? And they're natural entrepreneurs. And so one of the things I tell people with young kids, definitely by 13, but when they're younger too, is if they want something, we can solve the gimmies in the store so much by talking to them more about money from a younger age, right? And so we talk about opportunity. Our kids are 5 and 3. And so they're little, but they already understand some of the concepts of opportunity cost. Well, we'll say, okay, we have $30 to do something fun this weekend. We can go to the fair, or if you want to get this toy, that's all the $30. So then we're going to go home and play in the backyard with the toy. What would you rather do? And so then they get to make that choice, and we kind of give them that agency and autonomy. And they also get to say, okay, maybe it's not a $30 Lego, maybe it's a $50 Lego machine that I just don't want to buy them. I can look and say, okay, how much is in your savings? And so they already have allowance. And so maybe Henry will say he has $15. Like, he's our 5-year-old. We're like, okay, what can you do to get the $50? And so then their brain goes first, always, because they're kids, to I could ask you. And then the second thing is, I could help clean out the chicken coop. I could offer to do this. They start to come up with some of those entrepreneurial ideas, and just letting them practice that, letting them run with it, will show them too that money isn't some finite thing, that it is something that you can be creative about, that you have the skills and tools and resources to get what you most need. You just sometimes have to be a little patient. And so, yeah, it's just giving them the chance to practice as early as possible.
Mm. And I guess through doing that as well, we can start to tackle this idea that women don't necessarily value themselves enough. So for our kids, at least when they go forward, that part isn't such a big challenge for them.
When we hired our first babysitter, we moved to this area. The girl we were hiring she just turned 13, and so I called her mom beforehand. We'd like met through a local group, online group, and so I called her mom beforehand. I said, "Listen, all I do is teach women how to manage money, and so when you guys come over here, I'm going to ask your daughter how much she wants to get paid, and I want her to answer, and I want her to determine that number." And so I'm like, "Are you okay if I have that conversation with her?" And she was like, "Yes, absolutely." And so I asked her the question, and this newly 13-year-old girl got really shy, right? Immediately, shoulders hunched, everything in of like, whatever you think is fair, like that's fine. I was like, no, I want you to go talk to your other friends who are babysitters and ask them what they get paid and think about what is this worth to you to come spend a couple hours of your day here and come back and tell me. And so she came back to me and she ended up saying like $9 an hour or something. And I said, okay, I think that's great. I think your time's worth a little more than that. I know that lots of people who pay babysitters a little more. I want to pay you 12, and just know that I was willing to pay you like this time. This is your first time. Know that I was willing to pay you 12. And so you probably talked. And so now I've gotten to know her, and she said yes. When she asked her friends, she heard anywhere from 8 to 15. And she went with 9 because she didn't want me to be upset. And I was like, no, you have to go to like what you're actually worth. And so anytime too, as entrepreneurs, that we have an opportunity to teach our daughters or other young women that we're hiring in our business how to negotiate and how to think about these things and to ask for their worth is an incredible opportunity. And if you have daughters, I encourage you to have them think through things like that when they're going to become a babysitter, when they're going to hire their first job, guide them through some of those negotiating things so they're not starting out their careers, for lack of a better word, underselling themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that you did that for her. What an amazing lesson to have. And then you had the other side with my 11-year-old. She's got Pokemon cards. She goes, yeah, I'm going to sell these 10 Pokemon cards for like $50. It's like, yeah, maybe not.
But she'll learn that too, right? She'll go out and she'll try and they'll figure out what the market rate is. I think that's every kid's going to have their own financial personality. And as business owners, we all have our own money personalities as well. And there are business owners who are very, very fearful of spending money and what that would mean. And so they keep their businesses too strapped. They aren't willing to go hire the tools and the resources that their business needs to grow. And then there's people who are the spenders and they just want to, maybe if I buy all these courses, maybe if I do all these things and hire all these people, I'll grow faster. And you kind of have to find that middle ground and you have to know where you sit. And to do that, you really have to go back to your own mindset work and figuring out what you want, which is what we talked about at the beginning.
Yeah. And I love that you mentioned that mindset work is never done, because it isn't ever done. And I like to encourage my clients as well to have a success circle, which is like 1 to 5 people who are with you on your mission. But like
Yes.
with your mum's group,
Mm-hmm.
you can support each other and help each other through those moments, because you may have a very supportive husband, or but they don't always, if they're not a business owner, they don't always get it. And my husband's
Yes.
very supportive, but he doesn't always say the right things I need him to say. But my little sister,
Mastermind success circles are incredible. Yes.
yeah, exactly. And I think we can use those as an opportunity to encourage each other to charge more and get braver and bolder around that.
Mm.
So when it comes to managing finances, you've talked about where to start and what to think of next and to track those numbers. Are there any particular tools that you found are really useful with that?
I think at the beginning, for most people, sticking to a very simple Excel sheet or spreadsheet or even a notebook, just for the first, when there's not a ton of money coming in, right? You're a new business, it lets it keep it simple. After that, you're really going to want to make sure you have some kind of bookkeeping software to do this, mostly for taxes, right? That you're not overlooking things, and that you're keeping a very clear eye. And so, personally, in our business, we use QuickBooks. I'm not sure how international the different options are internationally, but having a software that can connect to your bank accounts and automatically pull those things in so you're not skipping things, forgetting things, or having to keep track of receipts can be very, very helpful. The other part is that you can actually use personal budget resources just like you would use for your business the same way you would use personally. And so what I mean for that is bookkeeping is very backward looking. What's already come in and what have I already spent? You'll know as business owners that not every expense happens every month. Maybe you have an email service provider that you pay annually. And so that's a really big expense when it comes up once a year, but you might forget about it the rest of the year. And so you can use any budget software. Personally, we use a tool called You Need a Budget, which is an online software that lets us plan out in advance and make sure that we're saving that cash so we're not relying on credit as a business. But both of those things, either a budget tool and a bookkeeping tool, can be very, very helpful.
I love that the idea of looking forward as well as backwards and staying in control then.
Mm-hmm. Just like our personal finances, right? Those irregular expenses, the ones that happen once a quarter, half a year, those are the ones that throw us off, right? We're like, okay, we've taken profit out of the business for the last 3 months. We're doing awesome. And then in month 4, oh my God, like this huge expense hit. And now I either have to put money back into the business to fill the hole, or I don't get to take any profit out this year or this month. That can happen. And so budgeting and thinking forward can help avoid that. And instead of you take a little bit less profit out those prior 3 months, but then you have the money there to pay the bill and to still take something out in month 4. That's what you can do once you've started to put yourself in a place where you're budgeting regularly and thinking forward.
Yeah. Yeah. And then finances, once you know what's coming in and coming out and where you're at, will be much less scary. I know lots of people are like, well, I don't know what's happening, so I just won't look at it.
Exactly. The head in the sand method is very common and it doesn't work very well. It almost always only gets worse as the longer you ignore it. So pay attention as soon as possible.
Yeah, I was very much in that camp for a long time. Well, I'm not there now, so that's great. Chelsea,
Fantastic.
you have shared so much value today. Thank you so much for sharing all your wisdom and really giving us so much clear guidance, but encouragement as well. Is there anything we haven't touched on, or anything, any kind of piece of wisdom that you feel every woman needs to know with for her well, finance or business in general?
So first I want to just go back to mindset, right? And just to spend some time working on money mindset. And so one exercise I recommend everybody goes through is to sit down, find a quiet place for 10 minutes, cup of tea, and think about your first money memory. What was the first time you remember interacting with money? Maybe it's something a parent said, something that, you were in a store, something your friend said, and think about that memory, write it down. There's a reason you remember it, right? Usually people think it's around age 7 to 9 is when their memories come up. Write it down, take a deep breath, and ask, what did you decide about money in that moment? Why is this coming up to you and what did you decide? Did you decide that your dad is the one who determines what is worthy of buying? Did you decide that you would always be poor? Did you decide that there's no point in saving money because it's always going to get taken? That's one we've heard from people who like saved up a piggy bank and then someone in their family or someone in their neighborhood stole the money, right? What did we learn? And do we want to carry that story forward? And that's a really good place to start your money mindset journey because it's going to pull you back to one of those core memories and let you start to kind of rewrite your patterns in a way that speaks specifically to you. But most importantly, my biggest message for every woman entrepreneur is that you are worthy of wealth and a successful business. You are capable, you have all the skills, and you can do this. Don't be afraid and just take the first small step forward.
I love that. What a great point to end on. Chelsea, thank you so much for being with us today and, as I say, sharing your time and wisdom. If anyone wants to know more about how they can get started with finance, how they can understand more from you, and you've got a great blog, and I know you have a fantastic podcast as well, how can they find you?
Absolutely. So we are smartmoneymamas.com. That's MAMAS. I know some people spell it differently. And we are at Smart Money Mamas on all social platforms. You can find us on YouTube, where we have a weekly YouTube live show. Our podcast is called Smart Money Mamas. You'll find us anywhere you look that up.
Fantastic. So I'll include all those links below, but for anyone who's out and about, smartmoneymamas.com is the place to go to.
Thank you so much.
Great. Thanks, Chelsea.